Hello, welcome, and sorry. Your favorite three Canadian Bitcoiners here for another episode of Maple Bitcoin Live. I'm Jor, I got Rajat, I got Forrest, and we're here talking about some Coinbase hacks today. What the heck happened there? Some self-custody stuff, some security things. And just like every week, we're going to be taking some questions near the end. So how are we feeling, boys? Happy Friday.
Yeah, happy
Doing
Friday.
great. Happy Friday, guys.
So a couple different things here. If you have questions, put them in caps, and we will do our best anyways to try to address the majority of them. If you do want priority, just like the mempool, you can send a super chat, you can send a zap, and your question will be addressed a little bit sooner. And don't forget to press the like if you don't have any sats to send. It helps spread the channel, grow awareness, and ultimately we are all on Team Bitcoin.
Yes.
So where do we begin, boys? Coinbase hack?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty big news. Yeah. Brian Armstrong, CEO of Coinbase, released a video on Twitter talking about the hack, and Coinbase posted as well. Supposedly, so that's data on that's greater than 1% of Coinbase MTUs. So
Yeah.
I don't know what MTUs means, but I'm assuming that's like clients, like users.
Isn't that less than?
Is that less than? I thought it was greater than. I don't know.
MTU.
The
Yeah, I think that's less than.
less than. Oh, okay.
That's
My
okay,
bad.
whatever.
So less than. Which people are speculating that maybe it's not less than. There's a lot of people that have been complaining for a very long time about very sophisticated phishing attacks for Coinbase users, calling with private information. A lot of details on the people pretending to be service agents, calling about, your account's at risk, we need to reset you, something like this, and basically extracting private keys from people. There's estimates of around $400 million of exploits, lost funds, scams, basically, that are associated with this. And what's happened is that cybercriminals, as stated by Coinbase, cybercriminals bribed and recruited rogue overseas support agents to pull personal data. And that's pretty massive. Monthly transacting users. Nice MTU. Yeah, that I don't know. This is a really big story. And what's kind of crazy about this has just happened a couple days after Coinbase was added to the S&P 500. Not a good look, I would say. But yeah, what do you guys think about this?
Yeah, I agree. This is a bad look. This is a terrible look. Who knows? Maybe it was intentional. Maybe they had the information and all that stuff, and they intentionally sent it to Coinbase after it went public. I don't know. Could be. I don't know. Maybe that's a speculation. I'm just guessing.
It is kind of weird though. It just seems like there's a couple different things happening here. Number one, they started offering the Bitcoin loan product that I think that was a couple weeks ago. That was a little bit fishy to me because they obviously, they're wanting people to deposit Bitcoin with them. That's kind of the whole point of the loan thing. Because I think, if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure you could deposit Bitcoin with them and earn a yield off of it. Or was that a different product?
No, it was you collateralize a loan with it. It's not a yield. So,
but they still take your Bitcoin, right?
They do, and they transfer it onto their base chain that they have, which is a crypto layer 2 on Ethereum, and they wrap the Bitcoin. So it would be hard to rehypothecate it, not impossible, but hard because it'd be visible on the blockchains as wrapped Bitcoin, which could be verified potentially. I'm not 100% sure how all of that works, but
that was a newer product though that they came to market with. And then of course they announced that they're going public. I think it was last week. And then this happened. So the Brian Armstrong video was a little bit of a weird one for me. It seemed like a hostage video. I don't know. It just seems fishy. And that's kind of my first reaction to everything nowadays as a Bitcoiner is like, okay, this is what they're telling us. What's really going on here? So is that accurate? I don't know, but that's kind of me just speculating here. So basically what we want to do today is we want to talk about self-custody. We want to talk about Bitcoin security, private key management, things that we have learned in our, I don't know, 10 years combined experience here, things that most people get wrong. You know, we've seen the price of Bitcoin go from 50,000 to 100,000 in the last year. And every time that there's a big run up like that, there's always a new crop of people coming into Bitcoin. And so it took me a lot of years myself to really figure out my Bitcoin security. And so kind of the hopes of today's show is going to be just, you know, spread a little bit of awareness, some tips, tricks, things that we've picked up. So where should we begin with this, boys?
I wanted to actually ask you guys, should we start with why this even happened? So KYC,
Yeah, that's a good call.
Right? I feel like it's important to look at it from that first principle angle where once you understand what the issue was, then you can start putting the dots together to figure out what's the problem here. So the reason why this happened is because of KYC. So KYC is know your client. They want to avoid AML issues. They want to avoid they want to avoid money laundering, AML, security, all that stuff. So they basically collect the information of their clients, and then supposedly that information has been leaked. So maybe they have addresses, they have social security numbers. I'm not sure what else they would have. Maybe they have full names, driver's license numbers, I guess.
Yep. Phone
all
numbers.
that stuff. So all that could potentially have been leaked.
Which is scary. And, you know, that's the unfortunate thing about Bitcoin is, you know, Satoshi, I don't think imagined all these big companies making you send in your government issued ID before you can participate. Thankfully, you don't have to. You can get Bitcoin through other ways. But that's the majority of people who get into Bitcoin for the first time. The first thing that they do is scan their driver's license, put in their phone number to confirm it. It's a pretty sad state of affairs. And the sad thing is that the government claims that it's actually, you know, to help people's privacy. And again, like you said, Rajat, to prevent anti-money laundering. There's always something. It's like the government says it's for this. The real reason is for mostly control. But yeah, I mean, without that, like if they never were able to collect this, if this wasn't the industry standard, then this would never be an issue. There would be no information to leak. I see this as more of a problem than anything. And I don't know what the answer is. I think we should always be fighting for more non-KYC ways to obtain Bitcoin. This might happen over time. It doesn't seem that way, but what do you guys think about this?
I think that KYC is a huge vulnerability. I think it does not protect users. The government or the regulatory bodies might frame it that way, but it is about control. It is about controlling on ramps and off ramps and currency controls, things like that. It is a huge vulnerability, and you know there was a time in Bitcoin where KYC basically didn't exist, where you could just sign up using an email. So the only information that a hacker would be able to get from a website where you're buying Bitcoin is maybe your email and your public wallet address, because it would just be sent to your public wallet that might be stored somewhere. And they can't do anything with that. They really can't do much with it. And that's a lot safer from a user's perspective. There are still ways to get KYC Bitcoin. It's harder and harder. And it's really going in the direction of more KYC, which is not ideal. But yeah, it's something that we should be aware of. And I think, you know, Coinbase is where a lot of people start, but I don't think it's where people should stay. I think that they should go to better secured exchanges to buy their Bitcoin, and they should use these as they should only go there for the buying. They should transfer it over, and they should be really careful. And of course, never give anybody your private keys, no matter what they say. Like literally, no matter what they say. No exchange ever needs to know your private keys. They never need to know that ever. And that's the only way they can get your Bitcoin is with that. So just know that.
Yeah, one of the great things about Bitcoin is though that after you get it, you don't really need to. Let's say, for example, if you get it and you pay somebody with it, then the KYC trail ends with you, right? So let's say if you get it and you pay your employees, you don't collect their KYC, or you pay a friend, you give it away as a gift. At a point, nobody knows who has that Bitcoin, right? So that's one of the things about the Bitcoin network. You can start a wallet. You can but create a wallet without having to provide anybody any information. You can download an app like Sparrow. You can create a hot wallet. You can buy. You can actually even go to like Best Buy and get, I believe, Ledger wallets. I don't think
BitKeys as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah, okay, there you go. So you can go there, you can pay cash, buy that wallet, and then you don't have to give anybody your information. And if you, let's say for example, if you get paid with Bitcoin, let's say you have a job where they pay you with Bitcoin, nobody knows you have it. Nobody knows that Bitcoin exists in your wallet. So
yeah, and to expand on that a little bit, there's assumptions that somebody has to make with a Bitcoin if they're trying to trace Bitcoin. So if you've bought in Bitcoin on a KYC exchange and you own it, it's pretty easy for some sort of body to assume that that's your Bitcoin, right? Because it's directly connected to an exchange that's KYC'd you and they've sent that, and that's a public trail. But again, yeah, what Rajat said, if you send that to somebody else, that KYC kind of ends right there, because now you've sent it and now there needs to be greater assumptions made. Okay, did you send it to your own wallet? Are you just, still holding it? They have to, ask you, they have to figure out, okay, who did you send it to? That person also has to admit that they received it, right? There's all these, it obfuscates it and really makes it less transparent and really creates a limit of, it creates some sort of plausible deniability within the system and really breaks up that KYC from doing what Bitcoin was essentially designed for, which is peer-to-peer transactions. So again, that is another way to acquire Bitcoin, is buying it directly from a person as opposed to an exchange, or selling it directly to people instead of an exchange. And it really creates a little bit of a layer between that KYC and you.
Yeah, that's the other thing I wanted to follow up with that for us, is you said plausible deniability. I think that people overall kind of underestimate what that means and how powerful that is within Bitcoin. Because even as you said there, even if you bought Bitcoin from a KYC'd exchange, moved it to your wallet, they know that that's probably you. They can't even really, they can tell that was probably you who did that, since you would have had access to the account that moved it. But from there, do you have the keys to it? And how could anybody prove that? And I think that that's, as Bitcoiners, that's the kind of place you should want to get to, is that Bitcoin is the only asset that you can truly own. And in that sense, you can also, I say hide it a little bit better, because how would they, if you secure it properly and set things in place, now, how can anybody prove that you actually own that Bitcoin? Like, what are they going to do? That's what I always think about, is like, what are they going to do if they come to my house and say, hey, you bought $200,000, or your Bitcoin from 2025 is worth $200,000. We need some taxes on that. Okay, well, prove it. How would they prove that I still have access to that? And then what are they going to do? So even with that, I think that it's just worth drilling into a little bit, the importance of non-KYC Bitcoin, but even just Bitcoin as a whole, like how powerful that is, that you can actually take self-custody of that asset and control the keys to it without anybody being able to really prove that you own it. Essentially, it's kind of a weird thing. It's unlike anything that, exists in traditional markets today.
Yeah. And, I would recommend, keeping good track of your Bitcoin, figuring out cold storage, labeling your UTXOs, doing the right thing by the law that you live within, and not having to create a situation where you have to use plausible deniability, be accountable. Because Jory, you were saying, like, what could they do that, they're demanding some taxes or something like that. There has been a case, fairly recently, where they put somebody in prison and said, hey, you owe a ton of money. We want that money. And the guy said, no, I don't have that, whatever, plausible deniability, right? They can do a lot of stuff kind of like that, right? Which is not great. But there still is a coercion that needs to happen. They can't just take it from you. But you still don't want to be in a situation where you're being coerced by the thugs, right? So yeah, do the right thing, be careful, all this kind of stuff. We're not suggesting anything really besides that. But this is, we're just explaining Bitcoin a little bit deeper than I think a lot of people recognize its ability from from the get here. Yeah.
Right. And I think that there's a couple questions. We're going to get to the questions here a little bit later on. We'll probably take the related questions first, and then if you have any other questions related to anything, really, we'll kind of cover those at the end. But I think one thing we could do is, as people who are in Bitcoin right now, you can use things like Lightning, you can use things like Liquid, where that doesn't necessarily get you off the hook fully, but it at least breaks the chain from when you sent that Bitcoin from an exchange to your wallet and then to Lightning or Liquid. It at least kind of breaks that chain there. And then the nice thing too is that when you're onboarding your friends and your family members, give them a Speed wallet or give them an Aqua wallet and have them set that up first, where their first experience with Bitcoin isn't scanning their government ID and taking a video selfie of themselves, because that's not what Bitcoin was designed to be. I think that, yes, if you have some money that you want to exchange for Bitcoin, there's ways to do it without it, but for the most part, that's pretty common. But I think their first touch with Bitcoin is important. So if you can find a way to do that with on Lightning, Liquid, whatever that is, and they don't have to go through the KYC process, I think that's a pretty important first step for a lot of people personally.
Isn't it kind of crazy that we have to be thinking about like
Yes.
our privacy for transacting? Like if we really feel like this is a currency, shouldn't we be able to spend our money however we want? Like, I don't know. It's kind of crazy. And I feel like there's a real right to privacy among like the other rights that we should have, freedom of speech, freedom of thought, freedom to practice religion, these kind of things, right? It's like we should have freedom of transaction as well. Like that should just be inherent, in my opinion. And yet we have to think about all this stuff because of what they deem Bitcoin as, which I don't know. I think that's all going to change. I think us as the plebs will force that change. Yeah.
Why do you guys think they're so desperate to have all of our information? Is it just because they want to track us, like the governments, the exchanges, financial industry?
Yeah, it's they call it anti-money laundering, but it's really like it's really just they want to make sure they get their cut. Like this is a taxable asset, and if they didn't do all of this, there would be no reason to declare taxes on these things, because a lot of people like myself, like I believe this is a currency. It's treated as an asset, but I believe it's a currency. And the only reason I pay taxes on it is because it's treated as a currency. So if there wasn't, KYC and connection to it, it would be a lot harder for the government to make sure that people are paying their taxes on these assets.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you, Forrest. I think it is going to change over time. I don't think they're going to be very happy about that, but it's just, I always go back to the 90s, the sovereign individual. Whatever's playing out right now was inevitable, right? Because of the internet. The internet changed everything, because the world is much more decentralized now. These centralized authorities are going to fight like hell to try to maintain this grip, but they're going to lose it, and they're not going to like it, but they are going to lose it. And the more that happens, the harder they're going to push back. Here's an interesting thought experiment for you guys that I've been thinking about myself. Bitcoin itself is considered to be a commodity, right? That's how it's treated for tax purposes, essentially. Like it's not a security, it's a commodity. Gary Gensler made that very clear, I think, in the US, especially with the SEC. But what is a commodity? And Bitcoin itself is really just, at the end of the day, data. So how are we taxing and considering Bitcoin to be a commodity like gold, silver, something that's physical, when this is really just data? Like maybe I haven't taken the time to understand the definition there, and I'll admittedly say that, but like it is just data. When you send Bitcoin to somebody else, all that you're sending there is data. The Bitcoin network itself is just a giant ledger that keeps track of who owns what. And yes, it takes real world energy to create new ones, but like, where's the line there? How I agree with you in the sense that this shouldn't be like a discussion. This should be fully private. It is data. It's similar to speech in this sense anyways. What do you guys think about that?
I think it's just them being misinformed, right? They don't understand how it works. So they think they can control it until they actually put in all the time, the effort, there's going to be bigger attacks on this. There's going to be massive attacks from governments and governing bodies to stop Bitcoin from working, to stop people from using their Bitcoin. I don't think we've seen even a fraction of it yet.
We,
But
we
once
should
they,
expand on that. Like, what do you see, Rajat, in the future for how would they clamp down on Bitcoin? Because I feel like governments have tried. China tried to
yeah,
ban mining, and that backfired on them. But like, what do you see governments doing in the future for trying to slow this thing down?
I think they'd probably make it harder to get an exchange account. Maybe they'd limit the amounts that you can send to exchanges. Because, I mean, think about it. The current system is a Ponzi scheme. Every time we move money from the current system into Bitcoin, it decreases the perceived value of the current Ponzi scheme. And it moves that value into, because I think, like, if you think about it, as the amount of Satoshis that you can buy with your Bitcoin with your dollars decreases, people see dollars as less and less valuable. So the goal here is to limit people from being able to move their value from the legacy financial system or from the dollar system into Bitcoin. If they can do that, then they slow down the leak. I think the intention here is to make people, I think the intention here is almost to starve it to death. But I don't think they can, because Wall Street's figured it out. I think it's like the saying, the cat is out of the bag, right? You can't undiscover something.
Yeah.
Bitcoin's already there, right? You can't.
He's out of the bottle.
Right. It's like if I think one of the comparisons that I was thinking about yesterday. So it's like if you try to ban people from running their own nodes, it's like trying to stop somebody from having a copy of a certain book. If the node can be, if the node doesn't hit, I think there's something like 80,000 nodes that aren't even connected to the internet and they're undiscoverable, something like that. But if governments can't go to those nodes and they can't see where they are, then how are they going to stop them? It's like having a copy of the Bible. So if somebody tries to take everybody's copies of the Bible or the Bitcoin Standard or the book behind me, the Internet of Money, if somebody tries to take all those copies and they try to introduce their own fake copy of it, the people who own it can easily fact check and say, okay, this is not real. Same thing with Bitcoin. But the thing is that governments are so far behind, they haven't figured it out yet. So they're going to keep trying. They're going to keep trying. They're going to keep wasting resources until they finally figure out that it's not worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no way they can stop it at this point. It's taken over. It would take so much colluding between so many different parties, all of the internet service providers, all the computers around the world, hard drives would have to be scanned. All this data would have to become like accessible by them. I mean, there's already enough open source privacy tools out there that make it really impossible. Like Tor makes it so that you can bounce around your IP between a bunch of different IPs and you can run a node. And again, it's undiscoverable who actually is running that node. Makes it like next to impossible. I wanted to go back a little bit to the commodity currency government connection or definition of it. I think they defined it as a commodity because it does have commodity-like properties sort of on one side of it, which is that there's a cost of production and there's like a supply of it that's being added. And that supply isn't directly controlled by anybody. So it's effectively decentralized enough to not be something like a security.
Right.
But like you said, this is really just data. This is data that we've ascribed value to. And that's the same thing as currencies. Like the digital dollar, like dollars in our bank account, that's just data. That's on a spreadsheet and it can transfer between different accounts. And that's the same thing. It's just who controls the ledger of that. So in a lot more ways, I would say Bitcoin is like currency and therefore should be treated as such. But I think there's certain aspects of it that make it commodity-like as well. And therefore they've just put it as a commodity because we can tax that, we can control it a little more and make it a little more difficult for people to use. And it really threatens the US dollar dominancy if we actually agreed and recognize this thing as a currency, because it's such a better form of currency than the US dollar. So it's a way to handicap it. Capital gains is a way to handicap it. The government is just trying to do as much as it can to stop it, but it knows that, I mean, again, They cannot stop it. So they're just doing all these things to slow it down. And enough of us just need to keep holding it and to keep transacting in it, keep using it. The layer 2s are great. There's additional privacy on layer 2s. And the actual ownership of it on chain, self-custody, that is the revolution, right? And I think that even the Wall Street adoption of Bitcoin, that will make it harder to stop. But I think the government doesn't really necessarily mind it, because they're thinking, oh, well, maybe people will just transact with the ETFs or with MSTR. And they can control those things a lot more than they can control self-custody Bitcoin. I don't think that's possible either. I just think that they see that as like another way that of being able to control this asset that they literally cannot control. Like, they could have all the PhDs in the room, all the CIA, everybody, and try to figure out, how do we control this Bitcoin thing? How do we stop it? They couldn't figure it out because it's impossible at this point. So I think any opportunity to slightly control it, they'll take, but to actually fully control it, they can't.
Yeah, and the thing for me that gets really crazy with that, the further you think down the road here, is basically as these fiat currencies continue to fail, think about what's powering these machines right now. Think about what's powering the governments is their employees, their henchmen. And as the fiat dollar depreciates, those workers are going to get to a point where they're like, okay, well, I'm making $100,000 a year. I'm barely paying my mortgage, my rent, my food. What's even the point? Why do I keep showing up to work for these idiots? And that eventually over time will just continue to happen. Like, their dollars that they're paying their employees with will continue to depreciate. So they will become less and less powerful because they're holding the wrong asset here. And it's just going to keep going down that same road. So into the future, I think that as governments, the harder they push, the worse their dollar gets and the less power that they have over individuals who are in Bitcoin, which is kind of the cool thing about it too.
These systems are only as strong as their weakest link, which directly goes back to Coinbase, right?
Yeah.
Who leaked the information? It was their foreign service clients or whatever they said it was, right? Rogue agents or whatever. And it's like, they outsourced that. Those people working for them probably didn't really care that much about Coinbase. They weren't getting benefits, or they didn't get paid very much. And then they just took these bribes. And it's like, the CEO of River is like, that's why we in-house all of our service agents. They're directly a big part of our company. We make sure that that's not a security aspect. That's not a weak chain. We don't have all of this kind of just pushed away from us and not really connected and don't really care about it, because that really created a vulnerability for Coinbase. And you're right. The government just has all of these employees, and all those employees are really the power. They just don't know that they have the power, right? Like, there's not one central person at the top. There's a bunch, and these people are all working for each other. They're working for someone else. Like, it's all this big giant pyramid of employees, and like, it's really just the work they do and the decisions they make that end up changing what the government does. And yeah, a big change would be, hey, I'm no longer accepting dollars, or I think we should change the way Bitcoin is treated because I have a financial stake in it as an individual, which we've already seen in the U.S. administration. And I think that's just a trend that's going to continue. And Bitcoin's going to become more and more connected and more accepted, and less regulation actually on it. But we're in this sort of limbo of where the governments around the world tried to do that, starting to realize how much it's failing, and they'll start to go against it. What they did in the past, which was try to stifle Bitcoin.
It's pretty crazy. The further you look out, you realize how different the world's going to be in so many ways. But it's the people who are showing up to work today for the government. And I mean, if you've talked to the CRA in the last couple of years, like, the people working for the CRA right now are not intelligent people. That many of them don't even live in Canada, I'm sure. And that's what's happening. I feel like it's very similar to the fiat system, the brain drain, moving from the fiat system to Bitcoin. And there's been a brain drain for a little bit longer, moving from the government organizations to the private sector. Because I used to be an accountant, and to me, it was like, well, why would you go work for the CRA? Because when you finish your accounting school, you could go work for the CRA or you could go work for a private company. And it's like, why would I go work for the CRA? What, like, I can get paid more in the private sector. I can actually do things that help people save taxes to, pay the CRA. And I just feel like that's a trend that's been happening for a while, but now we're starting to see the brain drain from the fiat system, like the financial advisories, the Rajats of the world, from that system to the Bitcoin system now. And that's a trend that's not going to slow down either. There's just so many of these different things happening right now that is only going to continue. They're not turning around. And we're, as you said, Forrester, we're just kind of in the midst of it right now. And it feels weird and awkward, especially if you have 1 foot over here and 1 foot over here. But it is just going to keep, exponentially growing at the rate that we're on right now.
Did you guys see, I think it was last year, maybe the year, I think it was last year, the SEC, the Securities Exchange Commission, wanted to hire Bitcoin. They wanted to hire people to investigate Bitcoin, to give them ideas on how to address Bitcoin kind of thing. But they wanted people, so they wanted people who are experts in Bitcoin, but who don't actually own Bitcoin.
Yeah, good luck.
Did you see that? I thought that didn't even make.
It doesn't make any sense.
Do you guys know anybody who understands, like actually understands Bitcoin, not just says they understand Bitcoin, but doesn't own any? Do you guys know anybody?
No, and the only one I can really point to that has some understanding is Laura Chin. Laura, the Going Up Forever Laura.
Oh yeah,
from
Laura
or whatever.
Shin?
Yeah, Laura Shin. Yeah, I think is her name. She doesn't own any Bitcoin, but it talks about Bitcoin, I believe. Yeah, that's what I've heard.
Maybe that's just her trying to keep people away from robbing her.
Maybe, but I think it's supposed to be like, I think they really, like, journalists think like, oh, I don't want to be attached to something because that'll give me a bias. But it's like,
yes,
if you don't own it, you don't understand it. So yeah, I don't know, but that's hilarious. Like,
I found the article.
So to counter this, though, like, let's just play this out. Let's say that in a while from now, let's say that the government employees all of a sudden decide that they want to start earning Bitcoin instead. Well, what does that mean? That means they're either going to leave the government as an employee, make the government less powerful, or the government's going to have to buy Bitcoin and pay their employees with it. There's only two options there.
Yeah, and I mean, there's an internal option of them just converting their fiat into Bitcoin, but I think they would just end up seeing like, oh, I want my wage to be denominated in Bitcoin because every single month I'm getting paid less because you're paying me in fiat and Bitcoin's going up. But if I was paid denominated in Bitcoin, my wage would actually go up. And then the employees have, and I think we've talked about this before, but then the employees have the leverage because the employer it's costing more every single month or every year or whatever to pay their employees. And the employer is like, hey, can we, they're going to have to like try to negotiate down, but then the employee is like, no, so it really flips the wage increase discussion with
the
employees
leverage.
and employers. It totally, exactly. Denominating your wage in Bitcoin is huge.
And that's kind of how I see Bitcoin today. Like, that's the reason why I buy Bitcoin today, not only for, the generations in my family to come, hopefully, but also for future leverage. I think that the Bitcoin that I buy today, I'm going to be able to use to gain time from that in the future. But if I have a company or something, I'm also going to be able to hire the best talent. I'm going to have leverage in that sense. I'm going to be able to say, hey, you want to work for Bitcoin? I got some over here. Come work for me. So you're going to be able to attract the brightest minds by doing that. And I feel like the opposite of that is also true. Whereas if you're somebody who's not buying Bitcoin for that reason, you're going to have reverse leverage where your employees actually have the leverage and say, either pay me in Bitcoin or pay me way more or I'm gone.
Mm-hmm.
Really interesting.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
Okay, so that was, I didn't really anticipate the KYC conversation today, but maybe let's round out the KYC discussion here with a couple examples. I don't really like talking about this stuff on public streams for obvious reasons, but I think there are some, doable strategies or techniques that people can use. The first thing that I would say is like, don't obsess about it, right? I'm kind of, if you subscribe to the theory that we've been talking about here, in the sense that this is going to continue to decentralize, they're going to be able, they won't have as much power and influence in a decade from now. So don't obsess about like finding non-KYC Bitcoin. Just get as much as you can right now. But you should still also be working towards a small stack of non-KYC. So do you guys have any like options? Bull Bitcoin used to be in Canada here, but the government kiboshed that. But do you guys have any suggestions for people who are looking to get some non-KYC Bitcoin?
I have a couple things to say. I would also, with the Coinbase thing that we talked about, I would just suggest, if you've signed up to a bunch of crypto casinos or Bitcoin exchanges out there, and you've decided to use one because you believe it's trustworthy over the others or whatnot, I would go into those other ones and delete those accounts, and just so that you have no vulnerabilities. Even request them to delete your data, because those ones will end up having breaches as well. Data breaches are really, really common. So I would just do that. I would concentrate on a couple, trusted ones. If you're in the States, I think River's probably a good one. Strike might be a good one. Bitcoin Well is in Canada and the US. I think they're a good one. And then as far as, I agree with Jor with have a KYC stack and a non-KYC stack. Look into options, maybe peer-to-peer, something like BISC, possibly, maybe ATMs, although a lot of those have a lot of fees associated with them. And you could start earning.
Keep in mind that if you do want to buy a peer-to-peer, you still have to pay like a spread above whatever the market rate is.
If you're doing it over like a software, or depending on the person, peer-to-peer, there might be some sort of spread.
Yes.
But the other thing too is there can be opportunities to get a discount peer-to-peer, which is kind of crazy.
Oh, there is. Okay.
Yeah, because the person selling it might be selling it disconnected from themselves, and there's a reason they're selling it peer-to-peer. I'll just say it that way. And for them, they benefit selling it peer-to-peer as instead of selling it on exchange where it would be connected to them.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a benefit for them as well. So don't get too ripped off by doing a peer-to-peer and buying.
Regardless of how you do it, though, make sure you label your UTXO so you know which one's KYC, which one's non-KYC, which one you got from which exchange. If you connect them all together, then people will know how much Bitcoin you have. So I think that's important.
Yeah, if you do a consolidation of KYC and non-KYC within the same wallet, those are all KYC now. So make sure you don't do that as well. I know somebody personally that's done that because he didn't know any better. He bought a bunch from a bunch of different things and then lumped them all together because he heard consolidating is a good idea. So be careful of that as well. Yeah,
that's what Carpe Diem Doom said in the chat there.
Oh, really? Oh, dang. Yeah, I think it happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, the thing that I would say on that too, and something that I've kind of learned recently within Bitcoin, is that I would say for anybody who's newer to Bitcoin and you're not running your own node yet, the best thing that you can do there is just set up 2 different wallets, right? Because if you're doing it through like a cold card and a Sparrow, and you're connected to a public node, if they have access to your XPub, they can actually see all the addresses that are associated with that XPub, from my understanding anyways. So if you had an address with KYC Bitcoin in it and an address with non-KYC Bitcoin in it, but they're both connected to a public node with the same XPub, then that's essentially the same thing. And I did that wrong for the first part of my Bitcoin journey. So what I would say, just to keep it simple, is that if you do have some KYC Bitcoin from Binance, Bitcoin Well, Coinbase, whatever, just create a brand new wallet if you're going to be getting some non-KYC Bitcoin, because then they're not going to be associated at all there.
Yeah, that's the safest way to do it. The other thing too, if you are using Sparrow and connected to a public node, there are options of different public nodes within Sparrow you can select. And one of them is, there's this whole debate around core and knots. One of them is Luke Dasher's public node, which is running knots. So it's a way to run that if that's something you care about without having to fully understand and run your own node.
Right. Yeah. We should get into a full conversation about that one day. Mm-hmm. But where would I want to go with this now?
I think should we get into just like general security practices?
I was going to say one more thing on non-KYC though, because you mentioned BISC. RoboSats is another great option. I've used RoboSats before. Bitcoin Well does have ATMs where you can buy up to $1,000 worth of Bitcoin non-KYC with a light account. Don't want to tell too many people that though, because Bull Bitcoin got shut down before when we were talking about it.
That's per transaction. You can do 3 of those a day total.
Right.
And that's per account.
So, right. Yeah, good call. And you could have a lot of accounts because they're not KYC'd.
That's right.
Wow. Forrest coming in the clutch. And then the other option, the other thing I was going to say is like, if you have a community that you're involved in within Bitcoin, like if you're somebody like Forrest who goes to local meetups, you can meet some Bitcoiners there. I mean, if you're anything like me, like when you're, kind of all in on Bitcoin, there's going to be some times where you have to sell your Bitcoin. And I have had to sell some Bitcoin the last couple of years. And instead of sending it back to my KYC exchange and giving it back to BlackRock or Michael Saylor, I found another Bitcoiner to buy those sats. So I think that that's a really underrated way to do it, either with a virtual community or something in person. But that's a good step.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about some tips, boys. Let's maybe just start with, I don't know. I've seen a couple examples in the last couple of weeks of people losing Bitcoin by just misplacing their keys or doing something stupid. So maybe let's just start with a little story from each of us. If you have lost any Bitcoin in the past, and how did you do it in relation to Bitcoin security stuff?
I sent the wrong. So I was supposed to get Bitcoin from someone. I think I sent them the wrong address.
Ooh.
It's like a million sats. I don't know whose address I sent them.
Damn.
So what happened with that?
Whoever got it got very lucky. Nothing I can do about it, right?
Oh, wow. That's tough.
Yeah.
So what would you say to somebody then? What did you learn from it, Rajat?
Oh, check the addresses when you're sending them 100 times. Because especially if you're sending a big amount, let's say, for example, if you're sending Bitcoin from an exchange to your own wallet and you haven't used that address before, make sure that you send a small test transaction. I think that works really well as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Sending a test transaction is good. You do maybe want to figure out UTXO consolidation if you end up doing that, because then your test transaction, if it's like $10 or 10,000 sats or something, that might end up being dust in the future. So you might have to consolidate that into a larger UTXO at some point. But it's still worth doing because it's nerve-wracking to send, a million sats or more, right? It's like, as your test transaction, that's a lot of money to make a mistake with.
Yeah, especially if you're new to Bitcoin, it's scary. Like,
yeah.
My best advice that I always tell everybody is just take it slow. Like do things at very low risk, even if it is a $10 transaction there. Yeah, it might be dust. I kind of have an opposite opinion on that. I think 10,000 sat UTXOs will actually be valuable in the future because those 10,000 sats are going to have value in the future. And the transaction fees at that point based on that will be much, much lower than like 1,000 sats like they are today. But anyways, I do think that it's good just to kind of start slow with very low risk amounts.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's a whole nother discussion right there.
Well, what do you think about that? Let's dive into a little bit, because I think that this is something that I think about a lot within, kind of how I'm structuring my Bitcoin wallets and stuff. Like, what do you think about that? Do you think that a 10,000 sat UTXO in the future will be dust?
I think it's very possible. Yeah. Because we have to understand what the limiting factor is for sending an on-chain transaction. It's block space. So if block space is in really high demand, then it doesn't really matter what the purchasing power of those sats are. Those sats are what's denominated for on-chain transactions. Like right now, it's like 22 sats per VByte, right? It's higher than it's been in a while. Yeah. There's a lot of activity going on.
BTC's Truth mentioned it too. I didn't see that before.
Like it really depends how much data your UTXOs are. Like, I mean, if it's one UTXO, it could still be reasonable at that rate. But I mean, there's a potential future where there's a lot of demand for block space, and it's an extremely limited resource. And again, there is a possibility of it, of all sorts of changes happening. But
I mean, kind of my theory on it, Forrest, is like at that time in the future, I feel like sats are going to be worth significantly more than they are today. So let's say that, somebody's paying 50 sats to send, or I guess it'd be higher than that. Let's say 500 sats for a transaction right now with one UTXO. In the future, I don't think people will be willing to pay 500 sats to send a transaction because it'll be a lot more in like dollar terms at that point. So I think the fees will actually go down, even though the mempool will be more demand. I think the actual amount in sats will go down. Even
Is it
though,
possible to, I was going to ask you, is it possible to do like fractional Satoshi fees?
oh yeah, like that's what I foresee coming. Like
Well,
nobody's going to pay a couple sats to send Bitcoin in that future where they're that valuable. It'll be microsats.
There are some limits within mempool filters for I think fees have to be more than 100 sats, I believe, for like current nodes. Because anything less than that is typically like a spam style transaction. So there totally is the possibility of that would just have to be a change within the node implementation so that miners could include transactions, because it doesn't go against consensus to have a smaller fee. It just goes against the node implementations currently. That's my understanding of it, very basically.
So right now the minimum's 100 sats?
110, I believe.
110.
Yeah, so anything less than that gets filtered out. It doesn't get included. Unless they, I don't know, use Slipstream or something, but Slipstream is more expensive anyway, so that doesn't really make sense.
So you would think then though, if that's the kind of the threshold today, in the future when sats are much more valuable, that might decrease to say 10 sats is the minimum, or 5 sats or something like that, and continue going down in that direction.
It's possible it could even go down even further, right? Because we could, make sats even more divisible. So yeah, I mean, it could be microsats or millisats or something to do transactions, which millisats are already a unit in Lightning on the back end and stuff. So it's entirely possible. Again, it just seems like there's going to be, like, if Bitcoin became adopted as the base layer of money, using layer 2s is going to be really great for the vast majority of transactions, but there's so many transactions that need final settlement, and they're so massive that they're going to be willing to pay not whatever, but a lot more than the vast majority. So I think there's a future where a lot of individuals aren't able to use on-chain transactions, but the fees are still not just in purchasing power, but in sat denominated value are higher than they are today. But again, that's what's so interesting about this, is it's like you want to future proof your UTXOs to some degree, but you don't know what the future is.
Yeah.
And nobody does. It's all speculation on what'll happen here. And just as we said, like the node implementation could change, and sat, they don't get filtered out if they're smaller amounts. And yeah, I mean, it's really hard to know. I just think that there's unnecessary risk to having smaller UTXOs currently. I would say that.
Yeah, and no, that's fair. See, and that I just like having conversations like this because I'm not 100% sure myself. I like hearing other people's perspectives, but I just think that kind of my summary of it is that I think a lot of people out there, they see the future and they only look at it with one dimension though. Like they'll say, you don't want to have any 10,000 sat UTXOs because in the future that'll be dust, because there'll be so much demand for it that, it won't be worth it to pay the sats, for the transaction fee there. But that's only one side of it, because you have to assume that, you have to look at it from the whole story here. Assuming that those sats are significantly more, people won't be paying as many sats to send the transaction, and therefore it actually will be. So I think that's the key, is whenever you're trying to look into the future, you have to look at it through all different angles and consider everything there, not just kind of like a one part of it. So that's what I would say that, but I don't even know how we got here. What were we talking about before this?
It was the mistakes.
Just one final thing on that. I just think when you're looking at fees, it's always going to be a percentage of what the UTXO is. So percentage wise, even if it was a small amount, we're talking purchasing power is higher, and percentage wise, it's going to be a higher percentage for a smaller UTXO than a bigger UTXO to transact with it. Because can
you explain that in a different way?
Yeah, the percentage is based off like the comparing the fee to the amount, which is the UTXO. So if you have a lot of, if you're sending 1,000 sats and you're spending 100 sats to do so, 10% of that is the fee. But if you're sending 10,000 sats, then 1% is the fee. If you're sending 1 million sats, so it's the percentage of the amount that you're losing by minor fees goes down with the larger UTXO.
Yeah, I don't. It's
just
this
another
is
way to think
again.
about
This is
it.
why I like talking about this stuff, because there's so many things factored into it.
Yeah.
And I think that this is a very important topic for Bitcoiners to do their best to understand is UTXOs. It's critical part of the journey. And I've messed up big time with this already in my Bitcoin path so far. But yeah, I mean, we'll maybe cover UTXOs in a different day. I think it's very useful to take a full lens at this. But anyways, let's keep her going with security there. What would you say, Forrest? Have you lost any sats along the way, and what happened?
The only sats I've lost has been from trading them back in 2017, just selling them prematurely. That to me is considered lost sats. No, I've been okay transacting with them, sending them. I haven't actually made any mistakes in that sense.
Wow.
But I know of a story of somebody that did, where they somebody did some work for them, and the person wanted to send them Bitcoin as payment, and that person didn't have their own wallet. They only had a Quadriga account. So against better judgment, the person sent the Bitcoin amount to their Quadriga wallet
What's
address.
Quadriga?
Quadriga X is an exchange that the owner of it, faked his own death. He stole all the Bitcoin. There was tons of Bitcoin in it. It was a Canadian exchange. Yeah, Canadian exchange.
Oh yeah.
There's a documentary made about it. It's on Netflix, actually.
Oh, Bitcoin, I think it's called, right?
Yeah,
It was called.
think so. Unless maybe, yeah, it might be Bitcoin. There's two Bitcoin documentaries. They love making the crime ones on Netflix.
Yeah.
They don't like talking about how useful it is. They just like talking about crime. Anyway, so he sent it to their Quadriga wallet, and then literally like a week later, the exchange froze and the guy ran away with all the money. So that's sort of an idea of like, if you're gonna, again, that's just the importance of self-custody and the importance of kind of doing a little bit of due diligence. If you send it to somebody, hey, how do you have this secured? Is this something you're going to lose? And all of that. So yeah, that would be something to consider.
Yeah. And I think for the most part now, I don't know though. It's really hard to say. That's why I like, kind of asking what year people got into it. Everybody in the world is at a different stage of their Bitcoin journey and understanding. This thing's so complex. It really is. Like, it's simple, but it's also very complex. There's so many moving parts to it. I've lost quite a few sats actually in my day, but the one that I wanted to focus on today was I think something that's going to happen a lot more. So here's kind of my theory is that you look at that website sats per person. I think it works out to be about 200,000 sats per person. If Bitcoin was distributed equally across the globe, 200,000 sats per person, which I think is high, obviously, but that's exact 21 million divided by people. But I think that everybody's probably going to lose an amount similar to that through the years. Like, I think that we're severely underestimating the lost Bitcoin. 222. Like, I've lost that already in my life, and my brother just last week lost probably the equivalent to that. And I feel like there's people who have lost more than that, and will probably in the future lose it as well, because there's just so many things that can go wrong. But the one that I wanted to mention today was that he had wallet of Satoshi. He had some sats in there. And as we know, that's a custodial wallet, so you don't actually owe the keys to that. It's just an IOU from wallet of Satoshi. And so he got a new phone, and they basically wiped his phone, and he lost all his sats that were on there.
Oh,
Damn.
no.
That's brutal. Yeah, I almost lost Bitcoin that way, actually. That was a close one, but I was super diligent because I had a few of those custodial wallets on my old phone. My phone got a huge, I dropped it, and the screen basically just these giant lines through it. It's hardly usable. But even with that, still just boom, 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 transferred it over, got a new phone, got it all set up. So yeah, that's definitely something to consider if you don't have backups for a custodial situation like that.
Yeah, and that's how I feel like a lot of people over these next couple of years are going to lose their Bitcoin, is by keeping on a wallet like Wallet of Satoshi or Speed Wallet, Coinos. Coinos is a little bit different, I think, but still kind of the same thing. Whereas if you upgrade your phone or you lose it or something happens to it, those sats are just gone. So I think that kind of my recommendation there would be don't keep a large balance on any custodial wallets. And we actually just shared a video. I think we posted it yesterday on the Maple Bitcoin channel, kind of talking about that a little bit. But it's just good practice. You know, every time you get up to like 50,000 sats, just send it to your cold storage. Again, you can always consolidate your UTXOs, whether or not they're dust in the future or not. You can always consolidate them later. But it's important to have the ownership to the wallet that you have your Bitcoin in.
Yeah, agreed.
So
all right.
Self-custody here. Let's maybe get into self-custody a little bit. I'm assuming all three of us have our Bitcoin held on cold storage wallets. When you guys are talking to people, what do you guys usually tell them in terms of what's the best cold storage option for people today in terms of a device?
Just based on what I've heard, I would probably say cold card. Keep in mind, I'm not an expert on this. I don't know all the ins and outs. I'm just going based on, it's just like everything else, right? You have to kind of trust other people at least a little bit. I don't know how to read code. I know there are other people who can read code though. They can probably go through it and they can tell me whether this thing works. And just based on consensus, it seems like cold cards are great. And then after that, I think it would be other air-gapped wallets. So I used to be a fan of Trezor, but I just don't like the fact that you have to connect it to your computer. Regardless of whether you can upload data to it, the data doesn't get transferred to your computer. You don't know what's really happening in the back end, right? I think that's one of the things that kind of makes me worried, but I still don't think that it's too big of a deal because nothing has really happened.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think I have recommended non-air gapped wallets in the past, and I think for very people, there's a lot of people that want to take self-custody that really don't know how to use computers, and it's really, really hard for them to figure out Bitcoin self-custody. And for them, I still think that some of these options, like Blockstream Jade, which has a really good software interface. It does have ability to do some sort of air gapped with like Bluetooth and QR codes, but you can connect it directly to your computer as well. And there hasn't been any vulnerabilities. It's sort of like air gapped is sort of like an extra thing, future proofing maybe, but also just like sort of an extra step of security that hasn't been deemed completely necessary, basically. So yeah, I think the Blockstream Jade is a really good, versatile, lower cost option with a very good interface and operability with Sparrow, which I think is a really good software. Basically, wallet visualizer is what I call those softwares. Yeah, the cold card, very, very good, and doesn't require as much like kind of hacking around the software and the device to get certain things to work, because all of it you can do within the device itself. If you want to create like child wallets and multi-sig, like it's all in there. And that for that reason, like people think, oh, it's more complicated, and really the air gapped side of it is more complicated. But beyond that, it's good that those options exist within the wallet itself to do a lot of the configuring. So yeah, cold card is the top one for me.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. Cold card is what I usually tell people. That's what I use myself, and I wouldn't tell people to use something that I wasn't using. It's from my experience, it is the best wallet. I think that one misconception within Bitcoin is that cold card's super difficult to use. And as you kind of mentioned there, Forrest, there are many advanced features, but they're all kind of hidden behind the advanced settings, which is nice. So if you just want to get a cold card and learn how to do it, you could probably figure that out in half an hour, honestly, with a couple of YouTube videos. Like, it's not that hard. I get that people are just so unfamiliar with it. They just want somebody who's done it before to help them out. But it's not a hard thing to do. It's actually very simple. Basically, you're just exporting keys from your cold card into Sparrow, which I agree is the best wallet out there, Sparrow wallet. And then you're creating a transaction in Sparrow. You save that transaction, you load it into your cold card, you sign the transaction, and then put it onto your, load it back in your Sparrow, and it's broadcasted. Like, it's, once you do it a couple times, it's very, very, very simple to do. And I would, if you're taking this stuff seriously, I think the cost difference between any wallets is very minimal. A ledger might cost 150, maybe cold cards 250. Mm-hmm. But like, we're talking about the best asset that has ever existed before in human history. I think it's worth it. And that's going back to what Rajat said there too. It's like, yeah, the Trezor might be fine, the ledger might be fine, but I don't love the fact that it plugs into the computer, because I don't know enough about computers myself and what happens behind the scenes there to trust my generational wealth plugging it into a computer that I use Amazon with and all these other tracking things and keystrokes and stuff like that. So I think that would be my recommendation is Cold Card. But I want to go back to Sparrow a little bit there. Do you use Sparrow as well, Rajat?
I do.
Yeah. I think it's a, what do you call it, Forrest? A visual?
Yeah, wallet visualizer.
Wallet visualizer, because you can essentially manage your UTXOs. You can label your transactions. You can set your fee on there. You can see it all very visually. I would suggest people, if you're kind of thinking about taking the next step towards a cold storage device, a hardware device, just start playing around on Sparrow first. Do it like very low risk. You can send like 10,000 sats into the wallet a couple times. Just consider that like an investment in your Bitcoin education. Even if they turn to dust, even if you screw some up, it's only going to be like $30, $40 worth of your dollars. So just send it. You can create a Sparrow wallet by going to sparrowwallet.com, download the wallet, create a new wallet. It's just called a software hot wallet, I think they call it on there. You can just create a fresh wallet from Sparrow and just start playing around with it. Send some from your exchange, send some from your phone, but just kind of familiarize yourself with Sparrow, because that's going to be one of your most important tools in your Bitcoin journey.
And I also wanted to just touch on this comment by Guri Singh, who said they cannot do self-custody because I lose things, including my keys. I also don't trust wallets and their half-life. What happens if a wallet degrades and fails? This is really interesting, because I think the terminology, again, so I called the Sparrow wallet a wallet visualizer. These hardware wallets, is the Bitbox here, I always use it as an example. People call these hardware wallets, they're signing devices. They don't hold your Bitcoin for you. If this thing breaks, if I've backed up my keys, it doesn't matter. I could back up my keys, generate keys, put Bitcoin on it, sign it with this thing, and I could throw this out the window into the river, and it's fine. My Bitcoin's safe. It's on the blockchain. It never actually enters this hardware device at all. So then you would back up, you would get another one, or you could do a software wallet even temporarily, or you just get another hardware wallet. You do a recovery instead of generate a new one, and you would put in your 12 or 24 words that you generated with the broken hardware wallet, previously working hardware wallet. And so yeah, that's why you don't really necessarily need to worry about the signing devices that we call hardware wallets. You just want one that's open source. You want one that's trusted, had a long years of people trusting it, and has not had any internal issues, which again, we've mentioned a bunch of them here that are all, as far as we can tell, and as far as the history has proven, have been trustworthy.
There's a comment there from 3 cents. I just watched a video where one guy said after January 1st, 2026, even cold wallets won't help you because of some of the new legislation in EU, America, and Canada. Any comments? They can't take your Bitcoin. Even if they can change all the rules they want to. They can create new legislation today that says Bitcoin cannot exist. It's not going to make it stop existing. It's going to still be there. It's like if government said that, if they try to ban, what would be a good example for this? If they try to ban gravity, will gravity stop existing? It doesn't work that way. So same thing with Bitcoin, right? They can try to ban you, but if somebody has Bitcoin and let's say it's non-KYC, or even if it is KYC, let's say I have Bitcoin, it's KYC Bitcoin, I send it to someone, and then they send it to someone else, and then they send it to someone else, and there's a huge chain of who owns that Bitcoin, and they can't really follow it. They can come after me, maybe they can come after the person who I sent it to, but at some point in that chain, the person who received that Bitcoin won't have any idea where that Bitcoin went. Right? So regardless of legislation, they can't stop you from accessing your Bitcoin. Even if let's say, for example, they do have this legislation and they say that you can't access your Bitcoin, you can't transact with it. It's up to you to give up your Bitcoin. If they say you have to give us your Bitcoin, it's up to you to give it to them. So I think we talked about that case before where the U.S. government tried to they arrested somebody who had, like, I think it was 105 Bitcoin or something like that. I read the article as well, but basically they said, if you don't give it to us, if you don't give us the Bitcoin, we're going to charge you $10,000 a day as a fine. Okay, first of all, if he doesn't have $10,000 a day, if he doesn't have $10,000 a day to pay them, they're not going to get that money. Secondly, if let's say he passes away in prison, he dies, something happens to him, they're not going to get that Bitcoin regardless. That Bitcoin is there. Maybe he had some kind of dead man switch. Maybe he sends it to his friend or his wife or his family friend, whoever. They have the Bitcoin, but the US government has no access to it. You need to have the private keys to take somebody's Bitcoin. If you don't have the private keys, then you can't take their Bitcoin. It doesn't matter what kind of legislation there is, doesn't matter who tries to ban it, doesn't matter who tries to stop you from sending or receiving Bitcoin. If I have Bitcoin and somebody has a QR code for a Bitcoin wallet, I can send them Bitcoin and nobody can stop that from happening.
I think it's important to dive in a little bit further there, Rajat, because kind of what Forrest was saying there too, in terms of the hardware device being the signing device. And that's the reason why you own the Bitcoin, is because you have the ability to sign that transaction. Without that ability to sign the transaction, without your private key to that wallet, you can't move the Bitcoin, and therefore you do not own it. So if the government wants to come and try to take it from you, they need that private key. They need you to access your signing device and move the Bitcoin from there. Otherwise, they can't do anything. So I think it's worth just going over again, because this is something that took me a lot of time to really understand myself, which is that the cold cards, these devices don't actually store the Bitcoin on them. They just give you the key to sign the transactions, which allow you to move the Bitcoin. I think that that's a really important thing for everybody to understand here. There's a lot of really good comments here too, but I just wanted to stop for a sec. There's a couple more I want to get into here, but the QR code, this is valuable information for anybody out there listening to this. So number one, consider sharing this video after the show finishes. Send it to any Bitcoiners in your life. To me, what I've noticed is there's not a whole lot of people talking about this kind of stuff on YouTube. Everybody's more concerned with the price, what's the news, stuff like that. This is the stuff that you need to know if you want to have your Bitcoin in 20 years from now. So consider sharing this video today with friends, family, anybody who has some Bitcoin. And even if they don't understand it, tell them to bookmark it for the future. This is critical stuff to understand. And beside Rajat's head, we do have our Coinos wallet back up and running now. We don't have any zaps come in because we forgot to mention this for the first hour and 7 minutes here. But if you have been learning, if you've been getting anything from this channel and you would like to support Maple Bitcoin, you can send sats to that QR code right beside Rajat's head. And if you don't have, if you're watching it on your phone and can't scan it, you can also send it to maplebitcoin@coinos.io. So big props to Coinos. They got our funds unlocked yesterday. The guy from Coinos actually sent us a little zap for our trouble, and we appreciate that. So any comments here you guys want to dive into? I see a couple that are just juicy ones.
I actually wanted to go into what you were talking about before, where you were saying how dive deeper into why government can't access your Bitcoin. Can you just share my screen there?
Oh yeah, sorry, I didn't even see that.
So this is an address that has $37 million in it. If we could access that Bitcoin, we would take it. Would you? If you had the private keys to this Bitcoin, would you guys take it? I would.
Yeah, of course.
Sure.
Right. And the reason why you can't take it is because you don't have the private keys. It's as simple as that. The amount of power that we have in this case is the same amount of power that governments have. And then the 3 cents actually, they had another follow-up comment on there. What he meant was, even if you have the Bitcoin in your wallet, you won't be able to sell it because it's deemed as dirty money or crypto. That's where KYC Bitcoin comes in. You can't send it to an exchange. Maybe the exchange, that's where they close off all the on-ramps or off-ramps. But you can send it to other people and you can sell it as non-KYC. If anything, you could sell it below market if you really want to get rid of it.
The other thing here too is like to send a transaction, you just have to get it included in a block. So that's what the fees are. They're bribes to miners to get included into a block. So if you have dirty Bitcoin, you just have to pay a miner that doesn't care about that. And miners are essentially decentralized enough that, yeah, you might have to wait until maybe Ocean mines a block or a solo block is mined or a a miner that doesn't believe in dirty Bitcoin mines a block, but they will include your transaction if you pay them enough. You could even do you can pay miners directly even to get your block included. And it's just yeah, so Bitcoin is, again, censorship resistant, right? So that what you're talking about there, 3 Cent, is that your transactions could be censored because your Bitcoin is deemed dirty or whatever. It's very, very difficult for this network intentionally designed. It's intentionally designed to be very, very difficult to stop people from sending transactions on it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's I don't, we kind of started the show talking about how powerful the governments are today versus what they could be like in the future. With capital gains, with dirty Bitcoin, Bitcoin's going to outlast governments. Bitcoin's going to outlast policies. If you have Bitcoin and it's all dirty, then yeah, you might have a problem. But like, just hold on to it for a while. Like we're going to get past this little weird phase we're in right now, and I think that's what is important to understand.
You could also throw it in like a decentralized coin joiner like Jam Market and completely rinse it, just leave it in there for a year and pull some Bitcoin out that's completely unrelated to it. And there's no way they would be able to track you at that point.
Or you send it from your, from your wallet to, let's say, an Aqua wallet. And then you convert that from Bitcoin on chain to Liquid or Lightning, and that kind of breaks the chain there. And then you can spend that however you want to. Like there's plenty of ways to do this. You just kind of have to have a decent understanding of what you're doing. And it takes some time to get there, but I mean, that's why you're here today.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think there's any realistic way that Bitcoin payments can get stopped indefinitely. And there's always going to be a way to get it through.
Even if they shut off the internet, I believe that there's ways to do it now between eCash, stuff like that. I wanted to dive into this one though, from Soken. Said the biggest risk people have is storing their keys digitally. Absolutely never do it. So the first thing that I would say to that is yes, that is correct. Anytime you have 12 words, 24 words from your cold card, from your Aqua wallet, anytime you generate a new private key, you get 12 or 24 words attached with that. And you should never put it on anything that connects to the internet. That's kind of rule number one. Never take a picture of it. Never keep it in a Word document. Never send it in an email. Like this is important stuff. But the other thing too that I was going to say is like, there's another risk within Bitcoin right now that people I think have confused, and that's steel plates. I think that steel plates are the most overrated thing in Bitcoin. I have some myself. I've used them before in the past. But you have to keep in mind here that if somebody comes across that steel plate with your 12 words hammered into it or 24 words hammered into it, they now have your Bitcoin. They didn't have to enter a PIN code. They didn't have to 2FA anything. There's no security on that steel plate with your 12 words on it. Somebody else finds that, they now have your Bitcoin. So that it kind of defeats the purpose of Bitcoin being an asset that the only asset that you can truly own. Because if somebody breaks in your house with a metal detector, finds your steel plate with your 12 words on it, well, they're more powerful than you. They now have your Bitcoin. So there are things like this. One thing I would just recommend everybody to start looking into is how to encrypt your backup phrase. So you have your device, like your cold card, and then you have your 12-word recovery phrase kind of right in, hand in hand there. The cold card is great because you need a PIN code to access that. Even if somebody stole your cold card, they can't really do anything with it without, knowing your PIN. And if they try a bunch of different PINs, it'll just brick itself. So that's a very secure part of it. But then people leave their 12 or 24 words on steel or paper or somewhere else, even if it's offline. If somebody comes across that, they now have your Bitcoin. So what I would say is just start looking into encryption. I think that is kind of the future of Bitcoin, where things are moving towards. And it is a risk. It's an attack vector if you have those 12 words laying around your house on a steel plate. Do you guys have thoughts on that?
I would say that, yeah, the physical steel plate is a vulnerability. It can be done in a way that can be secure, but I don't think alone. I don't think just it alone is probably good enough. That's why my top recommendation is to have a 13th word or 25th word. That's the easiest upgrade, in my opinion, to up your security and to store that passphrase completely separately in a completely different way, whether it's memorized or, encoded, encrypted, right? Something like that. I mean, you can do a very simple encryption yourself for a 25th word because it's one single word. And then somebody, and then your 20 or your 12 or 24 words can act as a dummy wallet. So you can throw a couple $100 of Bitcoin in there. And if somebody finds that, they think, oh, okay, I've gotten your Bitcoin. I'm going to transfer it. I've stolen that from you. They cannot tell from that you have a passphrase wallet on top of it. And when you do have a passphrase wallet on top of it, you need that 12 to 24 words and the passphrase combined to get access to it. So I think that is just a very, very simple step up in security that is very easy for the vast majority of people to do, and really gets rid of the main vulnerability of having that physical 12, 24 words. But unfortunately, it's really not that common. Most people that take self-custody just have the 12 or 24 words. It's still really not that common to have the passphrase wallet.
I think there's always trade-offs, right? Like I think some people, they're gonna probably do something wrong. They're gonna try to avoid the simple ways of doing it. I guess the steel plate would be like the simple way. They're gonna try to avoid it. They're not technically savvy enough, so they're going to make mistakes and they're going to lose Bitcoin because of that, right? It could go either way. I do like what you were saying though about the encrypted seed words, the seed phrase. I think that works really well. But even then, I don't know. I feel like some people they're gonna make mistakes regardless.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend people doing that on their own, because you're right. You know, when you're first getting into Bitcoin, the simpler the better, right?
Yeah.
And just because I'm saying steel plate is a vulnerability, don't throw it out today, right? Like, you have it, you've taken the right step towards that. I just think it's very overrated in Bitcoin that everybody just kind of gets a steel plate, but it is a huge vulnerability. Mm-hmm. And somebody on the live stream this morning was talking about they live in an area very susceptible to tornadoes. And I thought, you know, if you had your cold card and your steel plate in your house and a tornado ripped through there, your cold card is going to be 50 miles that way and your steel plate's going to be 50 miles that way. And you might never find either of those. And if that's your only way of keeping that Bitcoin, that's a problem, because your Bitcoin's gone. You can't access it anymore. So you have to be thinking through these. And probably the further you get into Bitcoin, the more of these things you start playing through in your own head. But to me, encryption is the best that I've found. But yes, it's not where everybody needs to be today. Just like Forrest said with a passphrase, like Rajat said, keep it simple. Just kind of look at where you are today and just go one step at a time. So if you have a cold card, add a passphrase to it. If you have a passphrase, maybe you add a multisig to that setup. If you have a multisig, maybe you encrypt the backups to that multisig. It's all done in order, and you can't really shortcut things in Bitcoin security, from my experience anyways.
And you could diversify that as well. You could have a third-party partial custody multi-sig. You could single sig passphrase. You could have a few ETFs. There's a little bit of diversification with Bitcoin holdings that you can do that also de-risks it. I mean, that, like, a lot of us come from TradFi where diversification is important. I think in Bitcoin, diversification of custody is maybe the important thing to do.
This is the last comment that came in here. Jackson says multisig is the best route. I agree with this.
Yeah.
You know, if you're proficient enough to set up one cold card, you can do that 3 times. And then in that case, so you play out the same scenario there, is like, let's say that you have a multisig, you keep one device at your house, maybe one in a different town, maybe one at the bank. Tornado rips through, gets rid of your cold card, gets rid of your steel plate. That's okay. You still have 2 different devices that you can now recover the Bitcoin with in a multisig. So that's the beauty of the multisig, is that it really replaces, or it eliminates, the single point of failure. That's kind of what you want to do. You want to eliminate your single point of failure, where if your house burned down, if a tornado ripped through, if somebody broke into your house, you have other options there. That's kind of what you should be working towards. And that's what multisig allows for. It takes all the risk away from you and kind of distributes that.
But even then there could be a trade-off, right? What if you lose 2 out of 3 private keys?
Oh yeah, like that. It's definitely a risk, because from my experience with multisigs, let's say that I'm in a multi-sig and I have one device here that I'm very proficient with, and I have a steel plate and whatever encrypted, whatever it is. But the other two people that I'm trusting with those devices, if they go rogue or their house gets broken into, then all of a sudden my Bitcoin's gone because of something that happened to them. So there is, you should not take any of this stuff lightly. I think that that's the main point that we want to get across today. Don't take this stuff lightly. Don't try to shortcut it. It's very important.
I think it's just important to understand the downsides of everything, right? If you understand the trade-offs, if you can, I think it's called a steelman argument. Is that what it is? Where you can talk about the other side's perspective. You have to understand both angles. So there's a service called collaborative custody. A lot of people who I used to talk about it before, but you have to understand even then that there are potential downsides. Let's say you have collaborative custody. You have two institutional holders of your keys. So you have a multi-sig wallet with two institutional holders and you hold one key. Number one, if the internet goes down and you have no way to contact those two institutional holders, your Bitcoin is gone, even if they don't collude. Then you have number two, they can collude. They can take your Bitcoin. I don't think that's going to happen, but it could happen. Number three, let's say you have governments that do collude and you have these two institutional holders in different jurisdictions, and let's say one is in the UK and one is in the US. The US and the UK kind of collude and they make it so that the institutional holders have to give their private keys to their government. Your Bitcoin is gone. If there's a world war and let's say we don't have the internet, we don't have electricity, again, you can't connect with them. I think I mentioned the internet before, but electricity as well. You can't connect to them, and there are so many different things that could go wrong that may not work in your advantage. So I think even with all of this, even with multisig, even if you have the encrypted seed phrases, I think it's smart to diversify your holdings regardless. You can have some Bitcoin in I know people hate it. They hate talking about the ETFs, and I get it. It might be smart to have some Bitcoin in the ETFs. It might be smart to have some Bitcoin in collaborative custody. It might be smart to have some Bitcoin in a hot wallet, some in a cold wallet, some at an exchange, as long as you can track all of them, and then have some in self-custody, have some in multi-sig, have some in, I don't know what other ways you would do it, but I think it's smart to have different ways of storing your Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice there, Rajat. I think that diversification within your custody is good. And if you think about somebody with a collaborative custody model, the risk there to me is not, and kind of what you were saying there, Rajat, is not that it would happen, but it could. I think that that's the assumption that that's what you should be focused on. Not if something will happen, can it happen?
Yes.
That's what you need to be as you play these things out in your head. Can it happen? And so, kind of my thoughts on that is like with collaborative custody, if somebody else is holding a key to your Bitcoin, that means that they know how much Bitcoin you have. All of that is fully KYC'd. If the government decided that, they don't want their citizens owning Bitcoin, they could subpoena that company to get your information. It's good. It's very easy. It's convenient. A lot of them offer a pretty low fee today, but there are risks. And I think that that's what we should be kind of focused on here is there's kind of trade-offs with everything. You just have to understand what they are and always, go under the assumption that not will it happen, but can it happen? And if it can, then try to eliminate that vulnerability from your security setup.
Yeah. Vake said there, as your Bitcoin stack goes up, your security must go up as well. Completely agreed. You can't secure a $5 asset the same way as you would secure, let's say, $1 billion asset, right? So as your stack grows, you need to keep changing and you need to keep learning. You need to keep figuring out what Bitcoin is. I think that's part of keeping Bitcoin, just learning about what it is. That's part of life in general, right? If you, let's say you want to play sports, you have to continue to learn how to improve your body to play that sport. Some people think that, because I have Bitcoin now, I don't have to think about it anymore. No, that's not true. You have to keep learning. You have to keep figuring out new things. Let's say, for example, there's 3 cents mentioned something about a quantum hack, quantum computing. You may have to learn about that. You may have to keep yourself updated with how to change your wallet from a regular Bitcoin wallet to a quantum protected wallet. I'm not completely sure of the right terminology there. I'm not sure how that would work, but my goal here is to keep learning, to keep trying to figure out. At some point, if you keep putting in the time, at some point you're going to find out things that maybe you're doing wrong and you can improve on them. That's the most important thing.
It'll save you a lot of money in the future. The more you know, the more you learn. And Yeah, there is costs to upping your security, but those are short-term costs, and they're protecting something that likely will become the vast majority of your wealth. So it makes it worth it. I mean, it's just a no-brainer. As your Bitcoin stack goes up, your security must go up as well. I completely agree with Bake.
Yeah, and don't wait either. That's the other part too, is like as Bitcoin price goes up, everybody who has the same amount of Bitcoin as you is going to be trying to get the same things as you, whether it's cold card, help from an advisor, or something like that. So just understand what it's worth today, not, what the fiat price tells you today, and kind of go off of that, right? Like if you assume that Bitcoin, if you play it out for the next 20 years at a compound annual growth rate, you can see objectively what that's going to be worth if it continues. And you should be using that number, not what the fiat price tells you today. It'd be like, let's say that in 20 years from now, your current Bitcoin stack is going to be worth $5 million based on that objective math. Would you leave $5 million in a briefcase sitting on your kitchen table when you go to bed at night in cash? Or would you maybe put that in a safe or a vault or something like that and pay to secure that $5 million? It's the same kind of thing. It's just the illusion that people think that their Bitcoin is only worth, let's say, $500 today or $5,000. They take it lightly, they lose it, and then a decade from now, they're like, shit. Those 5 million sats would be pretty useful today. I wish I would have taken that a little bit more seriously.
Yeah.
But I wanted to talk about this. I'm guessing Ryan's talking to me because I was the one who called steel plates overrated. But kind of going off what Rajat was saying there, like I thought for a while that steel was the best option. I said, I have steel plates. I have 3 of them in my house here. And I would lay in bed at night thinking about the vulnerabilities involved with the steel plate and what could go wrong there and what my attack vectors were. And it wasn't until I found encryption as kind of a better way to do it that I went to that. Up until that point, steel plates to me were the best way to secure Bitcoin. And I think that that's where a lot of Bitcoiners are right now. And that's kind of why I wanted to have this conversation, or why we're having this conversation today, because I see encryption as a much better way to secure your Bitcoin over steel plates. So, that's part of exactly what Rajat was saying there. As part of evolving as a Bitcoiner is understanding that maybe there's a better way to do this. Maybe I should look into that. And so that's part of it for me.
And I would also just say that steel plates alone are not a great option. But again, I talked about one level up
With a
steel
passphrase.
plates and a passphrase. So they're part of a very good option for an individual that wants a simple way, doesn't want to get into, or doesn't feel the necessity to get into much more than that, to be very well protected with their Bitcoin. Steel plates and a passphrase. Yeah.
Yep. And for the average person out there, most people are probably keeping their 12 words on a piece of paper right now. And I still think, just like you said, it is an improvement from that. It's not the end all be all for me now. Encryption is, and that's kind of what I talk about. But at a time, and steel plates were the best option for me, but they're not anymore. So I think everybody will kind of go through that same thing. Roman says you can still encrypt your steel plate. I'm not sure how that would be. How would you encrypt a steel plate?
Well, if you had an encryption method, you could stamp in what would correspond with an encryption chart or the answer key to the encryption. Basically, you could do something like that.
And kind of the encryption software that I use and recommend, it basically, you have QR codes that you have to match with a passphrase. And so we actually do recommend that people put their passphrase on steel, because if you lose that passphrase, then you're hooped.
Oh,
so we do recommend people keep that passphrase on steel. But the nice thing about that is if somebody came across that steel plate at your house, it's just a word, right? It's different than having 12 or 24 words on the same plate. It could be a password for anything.
Right.
So that's kind of the difference there for me. So
that's cool. I'd actually we should do a video maybe talking, like going deep into what SUPERPOWER is maybe. Yeah. Because it's a bit of a knowledge gap for me. So I would like to hear more about that at some point.
Yeah, it probably took me about 6 months to really wrap my head around why it was. I kept saying, no, that doesn't make any sense. No, that doesn't make any sense. And then I was laying in bed and I was thinking, okay, I have my steel, I have my passphrase, but there's still some holes in my security setup here. Mm-hmm. And so it finally clicked to me that makes the most sense. But somebody asked a question on the live stream this morning about this too. They said, should I tattoo my seed phrase on one foot and half on the other? What do you guys think about doing that?
Well, are you a tattoo artist? Because if you're not, your tattoo artist is gonna know your seed phrase. And you might want to do it if with this guy underneath his sack, he probably wants to do it in reverse because he's gonna need a mirror to see that. So
And you can't actually take your shoes off anywhere. You can't take your socks off either.
oh yeah, if you did it on your feet. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's a terrible idea. It's a terrible idea.
Yeah.
Very funny though.
It changes the dynamic, right? Because that's the whole point of Bitcoin, is that it is an asset that you can truly own. And so if you have it stamped on your feet, that gives somebody an incentive to hit you over the head with a baseball bat to knock you out so they can read your feet. So either knock you out or kill you. But that's what you want to do with your Bitcoin, is you want to get into a way where there's no incentive for somebody to kill you, because if you're gone, there's no way for them to get that Bitcoin. That's what you want to get. That's where you want to get to. So you don't want to put it on your feet. Also, I wanted to bring this up too. What do you guys think about memorizing your seed phrase?
I think it's a cool idea. I actually know there's also a way to do it where there's a piece of software that it's like a visualizer of you can memorize like basically shapes, and then you can punch in those shapes on that software and reverse engineer your seed phrase from those shapes. Like they correspond back to the words. So that's an easier way to memorize it, because you can design a shape yourself, and that will generate the seed phrase. So that is pretty cool. I think memorizing a seed phrase is great, keeping it memorized. I don't think that should be maybe your only option, unless it was like a case where you're trying to like flee a tyrannical situation and you really have faith in your memory. Yeah, maybe that might be a good idea.
See, I don't love it. What do you think of it, Rajat?
I think if you hit your head, then your Bitcoin's gone. If that's your only copy, then maybe it doesn't work. But I feel like you should have other ways. If you memorize it, you should have other ways of storing it as well, right? So if something happens to you, your family should be able to access your Bitcoin. But if your memory is the only way to access it, then all the work that you did your whole life to accumulate the wealth that you did is gone. So I think you should have multiple ways of doing it. I think that's okay. Along with the memorization, I think memorizing it is smart, because let's say you keep your seed phrase at home, and something happens where dementia, Alzheimer's, all that stuff is important. But let's say something happens to your house and you don't have it memorized. If you only have one copy of the seed phrase, if something happens to your house, it burns down, you have a flood, you can't get your Bitcoin back. Also, let's say you have your wallet in your house, you have the seed phrase in your house, your recovery phrase, and you have no way of getting back to your house. And let's say you go on a trip and you go to, let's say, another country, and you lose your phone stops working, you have no credit cards, your credit cards. I'm just thinking about the worst possible situation. You actually, even in that case, you may not be able to get a hardware wallet to recover your Bitcoin in, but you could probably go to like an internet cafe or something and recover your Bitcoin there. So I think having the seed phrase memorized could be a smart way to do it. But you also open yourself up to attack, right? If people know that you've memorized your seed phrase, obviously don't tell anybody. But if somebody knows, they can attack you.
Yeah, and there's about 10 people who just told YouTube that they memorized their seed phrase.
Yeah,
and that's my whole problem with it. That's why. There was a time, again, I've used steel plates. I've done stupid things. I've been through this before. I've memorized my 12 words. I did it every day for like 6 months.
Wow.
And then I realized, like, you know what? This is a vulnerability for me, because if somebody's attacking me, if somebody breaks into my house and they're trying to force my Bitcoin out of me, I'm going to get to a point where I'm just going to tell them what my recovery phrase is. If I know it, I'm probably going to give in at some point to whatever they're doing to me. So I got a new wallet. I don't memorize my private key anymore. I think it's a huge vulnerability if you're solely relying on your memory. That's a big problem.
Yeah.
But even having it memorized, the fact that you could give it to somebody else if there was enough pressure under you, that's a problem to me. And I just kind of run through this in my own head. If somebody did break into the house here and I did have my private key memorized, I know that I would eventually crack. And they would be able to tell in my voice and my tone that I know it. Like I think if you're in that situation, I know it's easy to, when you're not in that situation, to kind of assume that you would be like a Superman there. But like people would be like, you know, they'd be able to tell if you know it versus you don't know it in your tone. Like there's literally nothing that I can do right now. That's where you want to get to. But if it's in your head, you're not going to have that same sort of conviction fighting off an attacker. That's just kind of my thoughts on it. So I don't recommend people memorize their seed phrase. I deleted mine from my memory for that reason. But if you don't see that as an attack vector, then, you know, by all means.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who are for that. That's surprising to me.
I do understand that. I think the attack vector is, I personally think maybe it's a little bit lower than how Jor feels about it by my understanding, but I think it's pretty cool. And again, yeah, you just wouldn't want to only rely on it. That would be my main concern with it.
Yeah.
And I would wear a helmet too in case I was hit in the head, as somebody suggested in here.
Always.
Well, the ghost wear
always wear a helmet.
Always wear a helmet.
Wow,
And you can't forget it.
That's really
Next
smart.
Friday, we'll expect Forrest in a helmet. Just in case.
Yes.
In the 6th, just bought a cold card queue. Nice. That's a question I've been getting to is cold card queue versus the MK4. Both are great. I like the queue myself. But we missed this though, boys. Nav.
Oh yeah.
Oh yes.
It's just an interesting question.
So he said, if main chain is going to be too expensive to transact and Lightning isn't as secure, how are you plebs going to store it?
It really depends. Lightning can be very secure if you run your own Lightning channel. The insecurity of Lightning is that most cases it's custodial, which means that somebody else controls the Bitcoin and you're using it, the internal ledger peer-to-peer in that channel. That's the main insecurity. I think there's going to be times even in the future where you will be able to transact on chain because of low fee environments, high fee environments. Like right now, we just have a random high fee environment. I don't even know why. I haven't even looked into it. I can't figure out why. Like 2 days ago, I was transacting for 11 cents, 110 sats, 1 sat per VByte. I was on chain consolidating my UTXOs. Now it'd be much more expensive. So I think there will be times when we can transact on chain and we can open up our own Lightning channels and shut down Lightning channels, which are on chain transactions. And then there will be secure ways, but again, just places where you have to compensate to some degree, but you can use Lightning and feel secure doing so. So that, and yeah, I think people are going to still hold their Bitcoin on chain, and it's just going to be larger amounts, worth a lot more. But a lot of people in the future, potentially like newcomers to the space, will end up holding it in some sort of Lightning channel, probably.
Yeah, I think people are just going to get paid in Bitcoin and they're going to just leave it in their Lightning wallet. I think there's no real, it's impossible for everybody to have access to Bitcoin in cold storage. So I don't even think I don't think that's going to happen regardless, unless block sizes increase. I don't think that's going to happen either. So I think people are going to have to store it on Lightning.
I think there is a possibility into the future that block space does increase, but it would be.
You think so? Okay.
I do, but it would
Really?
have to be, yeah, but it would have to be because hardware technology is outpacing it becoming cheaper. So like hardware or hard drive space becomes so cheap that the decentralization of nodes is easy enough for everybody, and in fact so easy that we could increase the block space without jeopardizing decentralization of Bitcoin. I think that's the way that it could happen. I don't think it's responsible whatsoever to even consider it until that is the case.
That's a great point. I'd never considered that.
Yeah.
Because we almost had that, but at the time of the block size wars, like storage space was significantly higher than it is even today.
Yeah.
Like I'm gonna age myself a little bit here, but I remember when we used to store things on floppy disks, and you'd be able to store like not even a megabyte, I don't think, or was it? I don't even remember.
I don't know. I know CDs were 700 megabytes. So
yeah,
that's yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
I wanted to get to this one here, boys. I saw this a little bit earlier. GJ says, will 2.1 quadrillion sats be enough for the world in the long run? Or will lost and inaccessible supply make Bitcoin scarcer than anticipated?
Yeah, I don't think it matters necessarily the amount in the finite amount. Like the fact that it's finite is what matters. I don't think the amount of how much it is really sufficiently matters that much. In this debt-based society that we have with fiat, it does matter, and that's why they keep printing new money, because they need the liquidity, and they force the liquidity. They don't allow people to save. They force people to use the money basically by printing it. And even by investing, you're using money technically. So yeah, I don't think it really matters how many units there are necessarily.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Even if we think of it this way, with the where people were saying that there could be dirty Bitcoin, I guess. Even then, we'll have a limited amount of Bitcoin that we can use on peer-to-peer in a peer-to-peer way. Because even now, I think there's a limited amount of Bitcoin. I don't think there's 2.1 quadrillion Bitcoin for peer-to-peer transactions. I don't think MicroStrategy is going to sell their Bitcoin. All these BTC, all these companies, the Bitcoin treasury companies, they're not going to sell their Bitcoin. So technically, we already have less than 2.1 quadrillion. And then if you consider the lost coins, there's even less. So I would say there's probably less than 15 quadrillion Satoshi, or 1.5 quadrillion Satoshis. So 15 million Bitcoin. And I don't think it makes a difference. It'll just push the price up, and then people who have it will sell their Bitcoin into the market.
Yeah, and the main thing here too is that it's infinitely divisible. Like it's very easy to do a soft fork to make it more divisible. So just change the units again, and then that creates more liquidity because people can have access to these smaller units that all account up to more Bitcoin. Right now, there isn't really such thing as a Bitcoin. Like there's 100 million Satoshis, yeah. So I don't know. It's because it's infinitely divisible. That's way more important than the actual like amount that there is, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that the key there is that we never increase the supply. And if you think about why the supply will never increase, it's because the people who get to decide that are incentivized not to increase the supply. Like it's very simple. In that sense, it's very simple. The people who hold Bitcoin today are the ones running the nodes. They get to decide the future of the Bitcoin network. And there would be absolutely no reason for anybody to want to increase the supply and essentially devalue your wealth in Bitcoin. It just doesn't make any sense. That's the whole beauty of Bitcoin.
The reason why that doesn't make any sense is because the people running nodes very likely have Bitcoin of their own.
Correct.
Just because I know people are probably wondering that, why doesn't it make any sense? It's because people are incentivized not to devalue their own or debase their own savings.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's all incentives. Everything around Bitcoin is all incentives based, and the people that don't have Bitcoin, they might have an incentive to try to dilute it. The people that do, they are the ones that are actually running nodes and care about the software, and they're the ones that don't have an incentive to increase the supply, so it won't happen because it's voluntary. It's a voluntary network that needs massive consensus to move forward with a change. So it just won't happen if one or two people, or if people that don't have any power within the system want to change like that.
Yeah.
This is how I used to think about this. And this is kind of what helped me understand the real value of Bitcoin at a certain point along the way. But I used to think of like people coming across the ocean from the old world, we'll call it the UK for simplicity, over to the new world here in the North America. And kind of when they first showed up there wasn't a whole lot of people. There was a lot of land, just like within Bitcoin. At the very early days of Bitcoin, there was a ton of supply because of the way Satoshi designed the supply schedule. There was a huge supply of Bitcoin. And in that case, a huge supply of land. But as more and more people showed up and they started to explore and the land became more scarce, more people showed up, there was more demand for it. You know, people initially, they owned a township of land. And then they owned a section of land. And then they owned a quarter section. And then an acre. and then a lot. And we kept going down in the units as more and more people showed up. And I kind of see the same thing happening within Bitcoin, where as more people continue to show up, it doesn't really matter what the number is there. It's kind of arbitrary in a way. But the fact is if the demand increases, we can infinitely divide Bitcoin to microsats, and if we need to, millisats, and if we need to, Rajat sats, whatever that's going to be at the time. I don't know. But the point is we're not increasing the amount of land. We're not increasing the amount of Bitcoin. We just keep dividing it further as more and more people show up here.
Yeah, and that land, that analogy is really good because land is scarce within location, right? And that land gets more and more expensive as the demand goes up. So that's the same essential scenario that's going to happen with Bitcoin. Price is just going to go up. And
right, you could have purchased a township of land for like $2 back in the day.
Exactly.
Why? Because there was a bunch of supply and there was hardly anybody over here. But as more and more people showed up, now to buy a town, you need billions of dollars, or I don't even know what it would cost to buy a town nowadays.
They were actually giving land away just to get it settled, right? Yeah. And then same thing with Bitcoin. There was the faucet, the Bitcoin faucet, 5 Bitcoin if you just verified on a website. Yeah, it's like now you can get maybe some free sats if you join a reward program or something, but like it's that's going to dry up. That's going to get fewer and fewer. Like it's really a finite amount of total Bitcoin, and it doesn't really matter how much we divide it up, right? Divide it up. It's still finite in its totality. So yeah.
And as you mentioned, like millisats are already here.
Yeah,
we're using millisats on Lightning. They're using millisats within the ETFs. Like if you look at an ETF and how much Bitcoin or sats per share there is, it's like 20,000.25 sats. And that 0.25, those are millisats. Even though they don't show up anywhere on the Bitcoin blockchain yet, they are kind of, and it'll be built on layer 2s initially. But yeah, that's the direction we're going to. There was another question here. Oh, it's from Genkai. Do you guys have thoughts on this? Do you guys have an opinion on CASA, collaborative multisig custody? Have you guys used this before? Something similar to that?
I've never used CASA, but I wouldn't personally support it just because of who runs it. I don't think Jameson Lopp is a good actor in this space. Personally, I think he's funded. He's been a part of all the Taproot wizards. Basically a shitcoiner in my opinion. But that's personal. And yeah, I don't know. You got to think that could be a vulnerability if you're trusting somebody like that has lied about things. I don't know. Not something I would do.
I mentioned the collaborative custody before. So when you have collaborative custody, you have to rely on 2 other institutions to hold a seed phrase for you. So let's say you could rely on, I don't know, what is
Unchained?
it? Unchained. Yeah, Unchained, on-ramp, whatever they are. And then you have to rely on CASA. So CASA has one key and then Unchained has another key. They can collude. You don't know if they will or they won't. You can't guarantee that they won't. They may tell you, of course, it's in their best interest to tell you that they won't, because why would they say that they're going to collude with somebody else? They have no reason to tell you that. But you have to know the downsides, right? If you understand how collaborative custody works, one entity has a key and then another entity has a key and then you have a key. So they could collude. And then let's say, like I said before, let's say a war breaks out. You don't have access to the internet. You don't have access to the internet. You don't have access to electricity. You can't contact them to move your Bitcoin. So you're at their mercy. If you can't access either of them, then your Bitcoin is gone. And then what if your government goes to each one of them, and they say that they want your private keys and they take your Bitcoin based on that? How do you know that's not going to happen? You can't guarantee it. That's the point. So I think it's okay to have collaborative custody, but I would say diversify into other ways of holding Bitcoin as well.
Yeah, and there are many other options as you mentioned. Unchained is one, on-ramp is one. I think prices and reliability, like past performance, understanding like who you're working with within there, maybe those are all things you should have as variables. I'm not saying don't use Casa. I'm just saying that personally I wouldn't, because of who's involved in it. But I don't think that means necessarily that it's a totally risky thing to do. Many people do, and they have no problem with it.
Yeah, I think that it's important to know too that some of them they hold two keys. Like for example, the Bit key, they basically hold one key in the cloud. There's a company who keeps, I think it's Block, who keeps the other key, and then you hold one key. So there's situations like that. They're all kind of built differently. I think Unchained and Casa are also different too. This is something you got to do a little bit of research on. If you're actually considering putting your Bitcoin and leaving your Bitcoin with these people or these entities, you have to do some work on it. So don't just rely on what we say here, yes or no. You kind of have to do a little bit of research here. This is important stuff. But the other thing too there is that some entities you actually hold two keys. So you could hold one key at your house, leave one key at a lawyer somewhere else in a different location, and then they would actually just hold one key. So they would kind of serve as the backup there. They wouldn't be able to rug you in that sense. But the problem there that I see anyways is that they still know how much Bitcoin you have. That's a problem to me. Whenever somebody else, whether you trust the entity or not, knows how much Bitcoin you hold, that's a potential vulnerability in your whole setup. Government could subpoena them. In that case, they wouldn't be able to take your Bitcoin. But to me, it's just a risk of too many people knowing how much Bitcoin you have. And when you give a key to somebody else, because they have a key to it, obviously they know your Bitcoin balance. And yes, it might not seem like much today, but fast forward a couple decades from now, there's always going to be record of you having that Bitcoin back in 2025. So it's not for everybody. It's for some. The one thing that I would say about the solution that we have with our Superback stuff, the encryption, is that we can do the whole thing non-KYC. We don't hold a key. We don't know how much Bitcoin you have. We just kind of walk you through the process of it. And it's the best way that I've found. And it's significantly cheaper than some of the other options as well. So if you're interested in that, we'll probably do a show on it or a discussion or something with the encryption at some point. But yeah, there's a lot of good options. There's lots to consider here. That's kind of why we spent an hour and 51 minutes talking about it today. And we could probably go for another 5 hours.
Yeah.
But anyways, do you guys have anything else? We kind of got through the majority of questions that I wanted to get through. Did you guys see anything else on here?
So we talked about, so there was one, how do you turn KYC into non-KYC? We talked about that. We talked about that already. I think you mentioned it. You mentioned it earlier. You were saying, can you go through it again quickly? Maybe. I think that was a valuable one.
Yeah. So I wouldn't say it's like super effective to do. It's an option though. Like if you had Bitcoin that you bought at an exchange and you sent it to your Aqua wallet and you switched it to Lightning or Liquid layer 2, they'll still know that you purchased that Bitcoin at some point. It doesn't like get you off the hook there, but it kind of breaks the chain going forward for where you're spending that and how you're using it. So I wouldn't say it turns it into non-KYC Bitcoin. It just kind of breaks the chain there of them being able to follow it.
Yeah, and there's still possibly connections internally because Aqua Wallet would have that information,
Right.
but they would have to be probably subpoenaed, and they would also have to give that information up, and it would be pretty difficult, I think, for anybody to get that information. But yeah, there's other ways of doing it too. There's things that this is all hypothetical. I'm not recommending anything. And I also don't want to get shadow banned or anything, but there are things called coin joins, which is like an analogy that kind of works is everybody puts $20 onto a table. You mix those $20 up, all those bills, they're all serialized, but you mix them all up and then everybody takes a $20 bill back. And if you have 10 people doing that, you don't know whose $20 bill you just got, and neither does anybody else. So that's what a coin join does, but with UTXOs, and it just keeps whirling them around. People keep putting them in, putting them out, and when you take it out, it's denominated differently and will potentially be sufficiently mixed and changed so that you don't have a very clear connection to that original Bitcoin you put in. And you can kind of do that a little bit with like Lightning wallets too, like custodial Lightning wallets. If you put a bunch of Bitcoin in there and there's a bunch of transactions coming in and out, all different sizes, and then you move it out as well, it's pretty difficult for someone to really know what's going on there. I'll just say that. But yeah, non-KYC, like true non-KYC, in my opinion, probably the best way, and unfortunately this is only in Canada, is the Bitcoin Wells ATMs. They're very solid. You can do a cash voucher system. It ends up being around 5% spread, which is pretty low for non-KYC. There are other options out there like RoboSats, HODL, BISC, and you can get, non-KYC for about 5% spread using the ATMs in Canada.
Yeah, and if you really wanted to do it, like if you wanted to turn your KYC Bitcoin into non-KYC Bitcoin, like the true way to do it would be sell it back to the exchange that you bought it from, take the cash proceeds, and then go buy non-KYC Bitcoin with that.
Yeah.
That's the only real way that you can, turn that KYC Bitcoin into non-KYC Bitcoin, because otherwise it's always going to be attached to you. They might not be able to follow it going forward, but they're always going to know that you bought that amount back then, even if you flip it into something else.
And maybe a possible way around that is when you've bought it KYC and then you do this whole unlinking it from you, you say, I did sell it and I sold it right at the first transaction. I'll pay capital gains on that, whatever. Again, not recommending, but just a way of,
Yeah, that's good advice, because then that way you're not waiting 10 years before you do it. Yeah. And then you're still gonna have to pay a big capital gains, assuming capital gains are around at that time. But yeah, that's the way to do it, is right when you obtain it, essentially.
Yeah, and those cap gains are going to be low because there's only, so much volatility within the day. I mean, it could be a capital loss, right? Bitcoin could go down after you buy it.
Okay, I got one last question for you. This is one that's been popping up quite a bit, actually. This is not security related, but it's just a Bitcoin question. But before we get to that, the Zap's been pretty low today. I thought we've been providing some pretty useful information for people today, some valuable information. So if you feel like supporting the channel here, once again, we are 100% supported by the community. We don't have any ads. We don't intend on getting any sponsors or anything. We think it's very important that we retain our voice within the space here and not be influenced. So if you learned anything today, if you're going to change anything in your security setup, whatever that may be, or you just, had a good 2 hours with us, you can send some sats right there to Rajat's QR code right beside his head, or to our Maple Bitcoin at Coinos. So, we got another one here.
I think he means Lynn Alden, I think.
Lynn Alden, hot or not? All panelists answer.
No.
What? It's a meme, but yeah, I can see beauty in everybody. Lynn Alden, hot.
Rajat?
I guess I'll be nice like Forrest, and I'll say yes.
I think hot too. She's a Bitcoiner. She's got a pretty good head on her shoulders. I'd go hot too. I'm not going to offend anybody here.
Yeah.
Good question though. Thanks for the super chat. Okay, so the final question here for the day. When is enough buying Bitcoin? At what point do you guys say, you know what, I've got to where I wanted to be in Bitcoin. I'm going to start doing something else with my energy my value that I've added to the world. What are you guys' thoughts on this?
When is enough? It's like, if you're earning capital, you buy Bitcoin with it. I don't know. There is not, I mean, it's really just about like, I guess there's a point where you end up starting to not acquire more Bitcoin after you're earning years. And then you rely on that Bitcoin throughout, you stored that value throughout time. And now you're exchanging that locked up time and energy back to buy time back. That's what we do, right? That's the system we've set up in society. That's how people retire. They just typically retire and buy a bunch of bonds and stocks and stuff and have a house or something. But instead, we're just doing it with Bitcoin. So really, it's like, how much Bitcoin do you need to be able to live off of when you're ready to start living off of it? That's really the question, I think. And that is really just individual for everybody.
I think there's something else, another angle to look at that. It depends on how much you're enjoying your life today, right? If you're miserable today, then even if you're stacking as much Bitcoin as you can, I think it's more important to increase your income. regardless of how much Bitcoin you have, if you're living a shitty life, you don't like you don't like what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, you don't enjoy your life, you're working a job you hate. I mean, I think that's terrible. So
Mhm.
at that point, maybe you don't have enough Bitcoin, but you should work. There's more to life than having enough Bitcoin. I'd say there's more to it because you don't know if tomorrow is guaranteed, and we don't know what Bitcoin's price is going to be tomorrow. If you keep putting everything off just to buy more Bitcoin, then even if you have a lot of Bitcoin, you won't like it if you're on your deathbed.
Totally. Yeah, you got to live your life, right? Like we
Yeah.
only get one of them. Yeah, it's you need to figure that out for yourself again, but yeah, you gotta live. And if Bitcoin can help you with that, if you can, if you get to even just sell like a little bit of your Bitcoin and it compensates for being able to go part-time and that improves your life, or for you to be able to switch jobs to something more meaningful that's less paying, or start your own business and that you have to sell a little bit of Bitcoin, or you're not able to acquire and buy more Bitcoin, but your life is improved so much, like that's what life is about. Life is about living the life you want to live. Bitcoin is just a tool to help you do that. But if it becomes if it becomes the opposite, if you stop living the life you want to live only to stack Bitcoin, that might make sense in a in a certain time frame of your life or something like that, just to build that asset for the future. But you can only do that for so long, and really it only makes sense for so long.
Yeah, I go back and forth with this all the time. I kind of think that there's a time and a place for like something like a strike product or strife, whatever they are, where you can, earn a annual percentage of it and you can tap into that instead of having to sell your Bitcoin. But then I'm like, you know what? I just think I'd rather have Bitcoin. And I don't think I'll ever stop buying Bitcoin. I want to get as many sats as possible because every sat that I get and put it into my cold storage wallet, that's a sat that Bill Gates won't get, that George Soros won't get, that these other people that I absolutely despise, they'll never have that sat. And that's a pretty powerful thing. When you're talking about a scarce asset like Bitcoin, that's powerful to me. And I think too many people worry about the long-term implications of capital gains and like spending their Bitcoin and stuff. You know what? I'm not going to tell you what to do, but things are going to change here. Governments are going to change. We're decentralizing. Things are moving in a much different direction. And so I would say get as much as you can. We're in the Bitcoin gold rush right now. We're never going to be able to buy sats for this cheap, into the future. I was watching a stream from last year that I did, and the price of Bitcoin was like $40,000. You could get like 2,500 sats for $1, and we're already down to like under 1,000 now. And that's not slowing down. That's only going to accelerate. So get as much Bitcoin as you possibly can. Don't have any goals. Just add as much value as possible to the world. Whatever value you get back, put into Bitcoin, and you cannot go wrong with that. That's kind of my logic on it.
Yeah, like if you have more savings, if you have more production than you consume, then you still want to store it, right? Let's say you get to 10 Bitcoin. It's not like you're going to force yourself to buy something you don't need.
Right.
If you get even if you get to 1,000 Bitcoin, it's not like you're going to stop yourself from buying something you don't. Sorry, it's not like you're going to just force yourself to buy some random shit that you don't need. Or on the other hand, if you have, let's say, 0.1 Bitcoin and you need food, it's not like you're going to say, "Oh, I don't have enough Bitcoin. I'm going to starve myself for this month." Right? It doesn't work that way. I think regardless, it's just a savings account. It's a way to protect your value for the future, and that's how you should treat it. If you need more fiat, you sell some Bitcoin. If you have too much fiat, you buy some Bitcoin. That's pretty much it.
Perfectly summed up. It's a savings account. It's money. You
Yeah.
treat it as such. That's it.
Yep. 100%. Well, good way to close the show today, fellas.
Yes.
Lots of info there. Do you guys have any closing words before we wrap up? I want to hear Rajat's. Rajat's always got something smart to say.
I got nothing.
Buy Bitcoin.
I'm just kidding. Yeah, buy Bitcoin, keep stacking. I think that's the most important thing you can do, right? If you have, I think I like what you say in your shows sometimes, Jor. If you have an extra jacket, go sell it and buy Bitcoin with it. If you have an extra chair, go sell it and buy Bitcoin with it, right? If you have a Bitcoin light behind you that you don't need, go sell it and buy Bitcoin. Yeah, but I mean, just in general, I feel like that's it. The goal here is just to get more Bitcoin, and it's to stack as much as you can so that your family in the future isn't struggling to make ends meet.
Yep. It's we only need one chair, right? We learned that from Michael Saylor.
Yeah.
If you have enough conviction, you only sit on one chair. You only need one microphone. Do your best, stack sats, continue learning. I mean, that's really the message here. That's what we do this show for, is continue education for everyone that's watching. And we're still all learning as well. So we reiterate that knowledge that we gain. And if you do find that you've gotten some value from our show, you can send us some sats with that QR code up near Rajat there. You can scan that with your Lightning wallet, send some sats, and that goes to support the show. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, well said, boys. I think that, going back to the jacket thing there, it's like the fiat world, I think, trained us to, as soon as we get fiat, because it's melting so quickly, without us even knowing about it, we, you just put into things. And as you switch to a Bitcoin mindset, you realize that you don't really need these things. That it was a decent way to store your value before, in a new jacket or a new couch or a new set of golf clubs, whatever that is. But yeah, I mean, Bitcoin really changes your perspective, your spending habits. And I think that it is no better time than today to part with some of those things that you obtain from the fiat world and you're still hanging on to, and just trade those for sats. Even if you can get $20 on Marketplace, 20,000 sats, you play that over the next 20 years, you're sitting on something pretty substantial there. So thanks, everybody. Once again, if you're watching this later, I know that there's some people in Australia, Japan, wherever they are, watching the replay of this. We just want to say thanks for all the support we've gotten from our individual channels and for the Maple Bitcoin. And thanks for showing up for another Friday.
And make sure you leave a thumbs up before you leave.
Good call. So thanks, fellas. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you next Friday.
See ya.